You have to be saved before you start reaching lost people. How long do you have to be sanctified before you start sharing your story and giving the gospel to somebody? I'm here representing the mission of Jesus Christ. If we're going to have revival in Great Britain and Ireland, it's not going to come from the platform. It's going to come from the pew. Everybody okay? Everybody love me? Say, I love you, Brother Gleason. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, a man's mind stretched by new ideas will never return to its original dimension. I'm saying that the church is headed into an epoch when disciples multiply. Now notice that Acts 6:7. It says, and the word of God increased. Would you say that with me? The word of God increased. What does that mean? Does that mean they went out and bought big family Bibles? Well, I got me a big Bible. I'm just going to walk around and increase the word everywhere I go. Is that what it means? No. They didn't have Bibles. They couldn't go down to the bookstore and buy a Bible for £5. They couldn't do it. They had one Bible. It was in the synagogue in a box. So how did the word of God increase? Well, the pastors were preaching louder. They were turning up the sound system. Listen, on the count of three, I want you to tell me what the name of this device is, this piece of furniture is right here. Tell me the name of it. 1, 2, 3. It's a pulpit. And if this is the only place in your city where this is being preached, you will never reach your city. Can I tell you something? That's nice and handy for my Bible to put it on, but that pulpit's not even apostolic. Come on. It wasn't even invented till 1,000 years after apostolic doctrine came in. 1,000 years ago, the pulpit was invented. Why? So that people could come to a traditional, historic, stained glass church and listen to a clergy person who was the educated and the holy of the community preach to the people so they could sit comfortably in rows and stare at the back of the head of the person in front of them and nod in agreement or slumber and get that over for 45 more minutes and then go back home unchanged. Some of us aren't a whole lot different than that. We ought to run out of the church. Every time bishop or our pastor preaches to us, we ought to run out of there. You don't have to carry a Bible in your hand, just carry it in your heart. Rehearse what were they doing? They were rehearsing what Peter preached, what James, Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon Zelotes, Judas the brother of James and Matthias, whatever they were preaching on the first day of the week, that's what they would take. And they would share their story, and they would give a gospel presentation in the context of their testimony. And this is how disciples multiply. So how are we doing? Come on, Great Britain and Ireland, how are we doing? When are we going to get on the mission? When are we going to start being a part of that first century apostolic church and start living the way they lived? Come on, somebody lift your hands right now. Lift your hands to the Lord. I've heard 2 preachers in the last few years say something like this. We are blowing the book of Acts away. I know what they mean. I understand it. I've amened them in my context. I stood up, shook my hand, But as I was reading the book of Acts, in fact, I can't get out of the book of Acts. I've turned into a one-trick pony. I'm just preaching Acts. I'm just preaching. I don't care about preaching anything else. For years, I tried to reach for great thoughts and great sermons and great ideas, but I thank God He's got other people to do that, but I cannot get out of the book of Acts. I feel called to call the church back to the first century and lay down our traditions and lay down our laziness. Let me tell you something. There's a big difference in the way a first century Christian lived and the way a 21st century Christian lived. There's a big difference. And one of the reasons is because of the first century they called themselves disciples.
Come on. Yeah.
The outsiders called them Christians.
Yeah.
It was not a compliment. It was a pejorative term.
Uh-huh.
But Jesus called them disciples. Jesus never called them Christians. He called them disciples. And He said, if you want to be my follower, you gotta lay down your life and take up your cross and follow me. If you don't have a cross, you can't follow Jesus. If you don't live in self-denial, you cannot follow Jesus. You might sing in the choir. You might pay your tithes. You might come to church on Sunday morning. But if you're not denying yourself, if you're not laying your life down, Jesus said in Matthew 10:39, if you find your life, you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you'll find it. He's not talking about getting saved. He's talking about what are you going to do for Him after you get saved.
Amen, amen.
Don't tell me He's talking about salvation. You didn't give up nothing that you didn't get something better for. Huh? What did you give up? Pain, heartache, headache, overhang, spending. I had a pastor tell me, a man got saved in this church. He said, Pastor, I'm going to be the best giver you got. He said, how do you know that? He said, last year I spent $30,000 on alcohol. What did you give up? You didn't give up nothing to go to heaven that you wouldn't have to give up to go to heaven. So don't tell me that you gave up so much to serve the Lord. He's not talking about salvation. Jesus is saying, now that I've saved you, now that I've called you, now that you're mine, if you find my purpose, you will find your life. But if you find your life in this world, you are going to lose it. That sounds like Hebrews 5:12 to me. You're going back. You got started well, but now you're going back, and somebody's got to train you again.